Okay, so again, yeah, thank you for speaking with me. I really appreciate it, and I've read amazing things about you, and just really just amazed about how much you've achieved and managed to overcome. So I was really excited to speak to you about the specific topic about allyship. But before we sort of get into all of that, but would it be okay if I just ask you like a bit about how how you got there in the first place? So I was just wondering, what was it like growing up for you in Vietnam then?
So I spent my formative years in Australia for a period of time. I was bullied a lot in the school system, in society, because I was Asian, also because I was from the LGBTQ community, and just for looking different in terms of, that stereotype of being an Asian kid where your frame is different from everyone else. So, I think, finding that sense of community, I spent a lot of time in sports, which pretty much led me to the advocacy work that I do today.
Fantastic. It's amazing how much you were able to change your situation to something positive, even though it was so difficult. And so, how did you get into sports so young? And also, how did you get into bodybuilding
Sure. I mean,
specifically?
it was a very unique track for me. I think, when you're trying to find your place in the world and a kind of a sense of community, I just kind of thought, sports might be the place for me. And also it took me away from the school playground as well, from where I was being bullied. But I found that particularly in team sports, being an Asian kid and the only Asian kid in team sports, I found it a very hostile environment in terms of the bullying continued with my coaches, with my team, with other teams. So I didn't really feel safe in team sports. And very unique, I started in weight training when I was 6, and literally I just had some dumbbells lying around the house, and I just started using that. But I saw the difference in terms of how my body transformed, how I felt, my confidence improved, and my self-worth. But it was something also that I chose myself and I could do alone, because it took me away from team sports, and I loved it. And there was a local gym down the road, and I went to the gym, and it was just a sport that I could just kind of immerse myself in. And it, as I said, it took me away from the team environment, and it was just something that I can do myself. And it just, the way it made me feel and how it built my confidence, it was just like, this is the sport that I would like to do, even though I encountered a terrible amount of misogyny and sexism there, because I went from, kids sports to male dominated adult sports. But I kept with it because I just loved the sport, and that kind of led me on my path in terms of how I could use sport as this platform for achieving different things in life, but also, having a career through sports as well.
That's amazing. And was it quite difficult? Like, did you have your family supporting you? Did you have friends who were supporting you through that process?
No, I didn't, because it was just so unusual. It was such an unusual track for an Asian girl to be, thinking of going into bodybuilding. It was just something that I did myself, which was difficult because, I never saw an Asian person represented in the media that looked like me. I mean, I spent a lot of time, I talk about this a lot, in the gym reception, looking through the health and fitness magazines and just kind of reading about different athletes and trying to find a sense of self within that. And the only person that I could see that came up a lot was Arnold Schwarzenegger, someone totally far removed from me. But where I found the similarities was that he was someone who had, an accent, a name that no one could pronounce, came from a faraway land, but then used sport as his platform to change who he was, but also to levitate himself as a career. So that was kind of my first insight into someone who was different, who used sport as their vehicle. And in that moment, I knew that I could do the same as well. And I think, that's the importance in terms of storytelling and having some kind of role model, even if it's someone that doesn't look like you.
Yeah, no, Wow, that's amazing. I didn't expect Arnold Schwarzenegger as
No,
the
and
role model.
and no one kind of does when I tell that story, but it's not so much the person, but it's, you know, this uniqueness of his story and who he was, because I saw that uniqueness. It reflected back in me in terms of how unique I felt and how different I felt. And he had felt this difference, but instead of shunning it, he embraced it. And then he used sport as that vehicle. And I thought, you know, this is the path that I could take myself down, through bodybuilding, through sport, and using it for some kind of vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course. I'm like, and he did something really similar. He excelled at his career as a result of the bodybuilding. So that's such an interesting path to take, but actually really courageous, I have to say, because oh my God, I can't imagine like, but you know, doing that. I'm petrified like doing those kind of stuff in the gym because it is such a male heavy
Yes, and it is very
environment.
intimidating. And I mean, even now when you go to the gym, there's a reason why you see so many more women on the cardio and men on the
Yeah, completely.
weights floor. But, you know, I think when you're a child going into that environment, you don't have the critical and lateral thinking of an adult. So you just kind of go into it and just think, this is fun. I'm just going to, you know, do all these things. And when people say things to you which aren't nice, which obviously they did, I mean, you're a kid, you don't know what to do. You just kind of think, oh, that's not nice. And then, but, you know, I just loved it so much. I thought, I'm not going to let the nastiness, you know, take me away from what I love.
Yeah.
And I just think, you know, having the health and fitness magazines and reading stories of athletes, of, you know, how they've struggled but then how they triumph, really helped me, because I just had no reference before that. So,
Yeah.
you know, it just gave me a lot of time to kind of, you know, through storytelling, read about other people's stories and then think, you know, no, I'm going to persevere. And I just think I just had that kind of personality as well. I don't think many kids would have lasted in the environment that
Yeah.
I was in.
So yeah, no, definitely. And you were so young as well. And, you know, in a way, there's a upsides and downsides to the fact that you were so young, you were able to kind of block out a bit more all the negativity, but then at the same time, it's very tough as a child to sort of face all of that by yourself. Um,
Yes. And I think, you know, now I look back and I think those years kind of gave me this superpower, because I can walk into these kinds of rooms that are very male, masculine dominated, and own that space in a way maybe other women haven't, because I've spent so many years living through it and being able to navigate it as a child.
Definitely. And actually, I just wanted to ask, because I was so amazed that you managed to sort of volunteer for this White House initiative. And how did you get into that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a very unique story in terms of kind of where I started, you know, through my teens and, you know, being a competitive bodybuilding as a young adult, you know, experiencing homelessness for a number of years. And then through all those experiences, my journey to sports advocacy that I do globally, where I speak to businesses and advise governments all over the world around, you know, looking through the lens of sports through to equality, and also discussing the challenges and barriers that, you know, Asian LGBTQ people face within the community. And, you know, all that work, you know, led me to the work that I've done at the White House. But I have, you know, many years behind me of working with governments all around the world and having these discussions. And I've done a lot of political work in the US as well, which kind of led me to sharing my story as part of the first, you know, Asian American anti-bullying campaign, Act to Change, a number of years ago. And, you know, recent work I've done being part of the Team Biden,
Yeah.
Up for Biden, LGBTQ and Asian committee as well, and all the ambassador roles that I've also, you know, have under my belt from different organizations around the world.
And you have a more recent post as well, is that correct? With the Copenhagen as its next
Yes.
door.
So in you know, there aren't many Asian. well, at my level, in terms of the work that I do globally, there are a few Asian people, far and few, between the voice, out of obviously I come from the Vietnamese community, I'm the only person, but then out of like Asian, we're just like so few at this level that, this is why I do get chosen to be part of these different entities. So in 2014, I was the first Asian athlete ally ambassador. 2018, I was the only out Asian athlete as part of the Rainbow Laces Stonewall UK campaign. And then in 2019, I became their first Asian athlete ambassador. And then last year for Formula E, I was their first Asian and LGBTQ official judge. And then yesterday it was announced. So for the first time, World Pride and Eurogames are in the same country. Usually they're separate in different countries. So it's going to be in Denmark this year in August.
Right.
So I was named yesterday as the one of only 2 Asian ambassadors for Copenhagen in 2021. So, I mean, these are fantastic opportunities to have these conversations on a global scale with amazing organizations, because, when I think of, if we just think of the continent of Europe, we just don't see the visibility of Asian people in the media, in sports, represented in business in the way that we should. But, we're the most populous community in the world, but the most invisible in so many sectors of society.
Yeah, definitely. And so what's the future for Amazin Lethi then?
I have another ambassador role being announced next week. And I'm doing a lot of work over this next year around using sport as a platform for equality as we get, hopefully lead to Tokyo 2021. I'm launching the Amazin Lethi Foundation later this year with a campaign and then with a youth program to support LGBTQ youth experiencing homelessness in 2022. And then 22 is a massive year because you have the Commonwealth Games, Beijing Olympics, the Gay Games, the World Cup, so many, major sports events that happen to be, except for Commonwealth Games in Birmingham, the rest will be in Asia. So I'm doing a lot of work with businesses and governments all over the world of the types of conversations that we can have around equality using sport as the platform. And then what's that long-term goal of something that's sustainable, it's that change that's, everlasting in terms of change.
That's amazing, because you're also bridging 2 societies in that way. If it's all going to be held in Asia this time round, but you're coming from sort of the Western side, so it's like the bridge between 2 places. So that's exciting. Yeah,
it is, and we've never had this moment in history where we could focus our attention on the Asian community like this as well. And I think it is a moment in history because we won't have a clump of major sports events, in the next few years that just happen to be in Asia, because they will move, to different countries and different continents over the next few years. And I think, we need to have these conversations because what happens in Asia affects all of us, and, we're a mobile community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess this also leads me on to, which is, we're coming up to LGBTQ UK History Month, and it's an important month, obviously, because, we get to have some exposure for the LGBTQIA community in the UK, who have obviously historically been like completely put by the wayside. And so obviously you're in a really good position to talk about what allyship really means to you. So, what does it mean to you?
I always say it's great to be an ally, but you need to be an advocate, because ally can become a tick box where you tick a box and said, okay, we have that one Asian person, we have that one Black person. We're wearing the rainbow pin, we've put up the flag in the office, we're wearing the badge. But advocate is one step up, and it's a daily activity in terms of championing equality when I'm in the room, but particularly when I'm not in the room, because so much is said when you're not in the room. And it's, how you raise your voice then and there and address it, because, being, it's like, I'm Asian 365 days a year. I'm part of the LGBTQ community 365 days a year, not just LGBTQ History Month, not just Pride Month. It's, it's a lived experience for me. And as an advocate, it has to be a lived experience for you, that you're an advocate every single day. And what are you doing every day to change hearts and minds and shift the needle towards equality?
Definitely. Okay, that makes total sense. And I guess that leads me on to, why you think advocacy is important, especially, when you're not in the community. Why do you think it helps?
Equality lifts everyone up. And when you're and particularly if you're a business leader or a leader of an organization, when you're making very difficult decisions, you have to have everyone at the table, and you can't leave anyone behind. And it has to become part of your ethos and part of your company ethos, because, you have colleagues, you have staff, you have clients who are part of this community, and they want to see what kind of advocacy that you're doing to support the community, because doing good benefits everyone. It also affects your bottom line, and it shifts the needle towards having a society that is for equality and more accepting and celebrating of, difference rather than intolerance.
Yeah, agreed. And for you personally, have you ever felt like there's been a time where, say, a friend or an ally or someone who claims to be an ally has just not stepped up to their plate for you?
In the past, I think growing up, when you feel like you're singled out because of your sexuality or, obviously how you look, and you see people around you who you believe were your friends or your allies, and they remain silent when something happens. And obviously that is very disappointing, because you think, I thought you were there for me. And, when you're silent, you become part of the problem. And that's why it's so important to be an ally, and as well as an advocate.
Definitely. And in your personal opinion, how would you like advocates and allies to behave?
How I see it is that, this is, as I said, this is a lived experience. And, if you're wondering, like, how can I be a better ally and advocate for the Asian community, for the LGBTQ community, it's, listening in on our stories, taking an interest in who we are. We're in a pandemic, reaching out to, your LGBTQ friends and your Asian friends, just to check in to see how they are. There's been a lot, obviously, through the Trump administration, even though now we're in the Biden-Harris, but still, the virus of racism and hate, there's no vaccine for that. And it's like, if you hear something that is racist or sexist or, or homophobic or transphobic or biphobic or xenophobic, you need to say something there and then. But you also need to tell that person as to the reasons why it's hurtful and the reasons why you shouldn't say it, because some people don't know. Some people will say a racist joke or a sexist joke or a homophobic joke or a transphobic joke and think it's okay. So you actually need to tell that person, it's not, but also give them the reasons why it's not and why it's hurtful to people. Because if not, that person, whoever that might be, will continue to do it because they haven't been told out by it. And I think, we need to check. I think, the pandemic has given us a time to pause and reset, to continually check in with our own behavior and also our own unconscious bias as well.
Actually, and do you think it's getting better at all? Advocates, other people joining in the conversation, or do you feel like there's still a lot more that needs to be done?
Look, we have made progress. We have seen a difference because, we have marriage equality in so many different parts of the world. We have, anti-discrimination bills. We have a much more tolerant society, and people are being made much more aware. I mean, you look at the through, you know, the last few months of the pandemic, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement, we just haven't seen the marching globally like this. The athlete activism, we've never seen athlete activism like this of people. I think people got to the point in the pandemic, it's like, you know, we've had enough, but there's still so much more work needs to be done. And I think particularly for the Asian community, because we have suffered terribly through the pandemic with all the racism around, you know, the virus coming out of China, the global hate crimes, how it's been reported, how some companies have then used that as a marketing, very racist marketing tool. So there's still so much more work that needs to be done in different sectors of society to make sure that, you know, everyone's at the table when we're making very difficult decisions, or when we're doing campaigns, or when we're creating policies. You know, it has to change from the top down and the down up. But yeah, of course we've made progress, but there's always more progress to be made.
Yeah, absolutely. Onwards and upwards,
yes,
as they say. Oh, Amazin, thank you so much for speaking with me. Honestly, I really appreciate it. And, you know, really, really interesting conversation, and something that needs to be had everywhere, I would say. Really, you know, try and make us better advocates and allies for the community, for sure. So thank you so much for speaking with me.